this end and receive the pitching, because I'm kind of used to be the one with the crazy ideas and trying to convince others about what I think about it. So it's really going to be my first pitching sitting at this end. I really look forward to it. Actually, this landscape forum is kind of one of those pitching exercises as a whole, because when we decided to merge the forest days and the agriculture days and make one landscape forum, the pitch was that, you know, it's maybe not so much about new ideas, but it's about bringing together different communities with existing ideas, and there will be lots of new solutions emerging. And I think that's what we're beginning to see. So I think I'm all for the pitching. I'm all for doing it at an uncomfortable level, and I hope you are as well. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Irene. I'm currently working at the Ministry of Environment of Peru as the youth liaison with the COP20 presidency. But I haven't done so much pitching at my current position. Mostly it comes from my experience founding a social enterprise. I run a company called Loop, Life Out of Plastic. And I think the most important thing about pitching is getting through the why. Why are you sacrificing yourself, doing what you're doing, struggling to get investments, struggling to believe in your mission and your passion? You need to have that why very clear. What's your long-term vision? And convince others about why it's worthwhile investing in your passion.
Does this work? Yes? Okay, my name is Paola Agostini. I'm at the World Bank. I coordinate different programs that summed all together really make the landscape. I'm the coordinator for TerrAfrica, which is a program on sustainable land and water management, for the RED program in the Africa region, and for the GEF, that really looks at biodiversity. So I'm basically have been working on the interface between environment and agriculture for my entire life, and I'm really in heaven being here at this landscape forum, because it's the first time I see a lot of people like me and such a great forum organized on exactly this topic. So with that, if I have to tell you about my experience in pitching, I think I have learned in these years that a few things. And I want to tell you a couple of key messages for people who are not very eloquent. You know, for people who are very eloquent, maybe pitching it's easier. But for people who are not, they should use other tools. So first of all, my suggestion, my advice is use very few words, but keywords. The second is sometimes in images talk more than 1,000 words. So just use a 30-second promo video of what you want to say, and that is going to we had very difficult problems in one country in Africa, in Burundi, and we didn't really know how to bring this to the surface. And somebody just put it in writing and said, I really don't have any comments on this apart from, and he dropped a bomb in the apart from. And that created a lot of awareness, and that reached a lot more people than any other very eloquent discussion. And so that was fantastic. And the last trick that I most of the time think is one of the most effective is actually you don't pitch yourself, you get someone else to say for you, and that's the client. And if the client is going to say what you want to say, you can just stay in the back and be really happy, because that's going to be more effective than anything else. Thank you.
Okay, hi there. I'm Andy Jarvis. I just flew in from San Francisco on my private jet. I'm the CEO and founder of EatMyCarbon.com. It allows you to do real-time offsetting of your plate of food, you know, so I encourage you all to try that out. Since making my millions, I've started now working for the CGIAR, leading climate-smart agriculture work. So I'd say, you know, pitching, I'm a boundary pitcher. I get pitched at all the time, you know, sometimes it hits me on the head, you know, the ball and stuff, but I get pitched at all the time, but I'm also pitching at other people. And I'd say the power of an idea is limitless, right? So it has to be a great idea. And I'm not such a nice dragon, Rachel, you know, I'm I'm a tough dragon. I have attention deficit disorder. So you have 10 seconds of my attention, otherwise I'm starting thinking about how to do the next .com and make my next billion.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to start with a pitch. So I'm very excited to present Wen Yu. Wen Yu's from our Green Economy group, and she'll have the floor for 2 minutes, and then we'll let four of the panelists respond.
Hi, I'm just going to introduce my pitch, and I'm going to say it's targeted at Ms. Rachel Kyte before I start. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a story about my favorite miracle. They're very small little miracles, but they make me very incredibly happy and satisfied in the morning. They traveled 9,710 kilometers from the hills of Peru to my coffee table in London. And these little small miracles make a lot of us happy because you had them during break. They're coffee. And coffee is an interesting story because we drink them all the time, but did you know, out of 25 million coffee farmers in the world, 80% of them barely have a livelihood that can sustain themselves. And whenever there's environmental degradation, when there is soil degradation, when there is economic volatility, these farmers often go bankrupt. They cannot support themselves. They cannot support their children and their families. The premium coffee that you buy at $20 in a store in US, they get only $1. So there's a problem, but the problem isn't just limited to coffee. The problem is limited to the supply chains, how it is unfair and how it is unsustainable in all products that we see, such as palm oil, such as paper, even stuff like the sugar you put in tea. So we need a solution. The solution is we need to reduce, for example, the 20 intermediaries between the coffee producer and the coffee consumer. The intermediaries that siphon off the profit that can go to farmers. But we also need people to be more educated and for consumers to have a say and to put pressure. We need the World Bank, a major agenda and norm setter in global policy, in global development, in the global economy, to highlight not just the importance of climate change, but specifically the importance of having a fair and sustainable supply chain. So around this time last year, I was reading an article in the Tube in London, and it was talking about a woman that was straight talking, who doesn't accept nonsense and has a warrior-like spirit. And to my dismay, I wasn't famous enough, so it's obviously not about me. In fact, it was about you, Rachel. It was about an activist bureaucrat who has a conscience, who is shaking up the world in World Bank. And what we want you to do today is something very simple. We're not going to ask you to do a lot. We just want you to take the first step in recognizing the importance by using your dominant position in the World Bank. And we're going to ask you to do one thing, which is to start an online application that can be seen on desktops and mobiles. And we say the World Bank has already done a lot of this. The World Bank has done microstats. It has transparent algorithms that show people the economic viability of giving funds to countries. And we think this is a first step. You have the technology, you have the bureaucratic capabilities, and you have the knowledge that penetrate far and wide. And we think this is time for people to see sustainable supply chains on their phone. So this is very simple. It's a first step to recognizing transparency and traceability. It incentivizes individuals, government, and private sector actors. It will crowdsource information, allow people with this information to update the information onto the app so the data set is public and open. I'm going to conclude with a paragraph from the World Bank website. I'm just going to replace the word climate change with supply chains. Climate change with supply chains. And it would say that sustainable supply chains is a fundamental threat to our development. And the earlier we address it, the lower the cost it would take. So I hope you can take my advice and let me know what you think.
We'll continue. You guys have mics. So we'll start. We have time for 4 responses from the panel, so we can start with Rachel.
Okay, so you get points for research, which is kind of important. You get points for passion, you get points for focusing on something which really is a problem. I think that there's 3 points I'd make. One is, who really cares? And all of the evidence is that there is a percentage of the coffee buying public that cares a lot about, you know, the poverty at the end of the supply chain and, you know, climate change affecting coffee yields and whatever. And then there's the vast majority of the coffee drinking public who only care about the price of the cup of coffee. And so I think that what you're going to have to do is we have to deal with the dynamics of the coffee business, appeal to that segment that do care, and really dig down into the business case for the people who don't care, and really dig down into the investors in the coffee business who will presumably be motivated because there's the potential disappearance of the coffee business. And so I think that you need to direct this more towards the business case of what happens when coffee disappears, rather than why anybody who's drinking coffee in the morning cares very much about somebody a million miles away. Hard truth. The second thing is brand confusion. If all of the data shows you that there's massive brand confusion. Fair trade, organic, you know, climate smart coffee. I don't know. I mean, you name it. You go, and even I go to the supermarket shelf. I really, you know, I kind of walk away because of the. So I think that we can work on that. Now, one hard reality about the World Bank Group: we can have huge influence as a standard setter. We lend $9 billion a year in agriculture. $9 billion in the global agricultural business is not even a drop in the ocean. It is a particle in a drop in the ocean. So I'd be happy to work with you on that. But we lend as development institutions, you know, a few $100 billion a year into what is, you know, the food market is $1 trillion market. So, you know, where the leverage points are. But I am interested in having a follow-up conversation with you to see whether we can redirect the passion a little bit, and then I think there's something we can do together.
All right, Peter, you want to go next?
Yeah, so this is my debut, Zidon. Okay, without repeating too much of what Rachel said, besides that you don't really need the World Bank, is to say that I think we should zoom out a little bit, because you started out very interestingly by saying that, you know, this is about the growers not earning enough to make this an interesting livelihood, because there are lots of transaction costs down the line. And I think that a big part of the sustainability in value chains is that they are profitable for those that stand at the beginning of them. So I think your pitch, I would take it more as figuring out how can we make life as a coffee grower more interesting, i.e. making more money and making perhaps delivering quality products. And one thing that came up in a different seminar we had not so long ago in the Climate Summit week actually, was that, you know, we really need to figure out how to use technology for the producers at the far end of the value chains to benefit. And we came to something that we called Amazon.com to the Amazon. We need to figure out how can marketing be done further out in the rural areas for quality products. There shouldn't be any technology problem with that. So if our friend from San Francisco here can flow down some 10 billion in fiber optics in the developing world, and we'll set up the apps that you want for selling the coffee. Thank you.
Great. We actually have time for one last comment. I'll let you pitch for each other for who goes first.
Okay. So let me say, first of all, that I worked a lot on coffee, both in Africa and in Latin America, so I found it fantastic that you choose this topic to make the pitch. My suggestion would be, generally speaking, I would have started with the quality of the coffee. Maybe even give me to try a coffee that is produced, you know, with pesticides and fertilizer, and a nice shade-grown coffee, and try to pitch at the quality for that. And the second is, because I think that at the end of the day, the final consumer cares about the price. That's one part of the consumer, but also there is another part of the consumer who care about the quality. And the second part that I think is very important is that is not so much all this value chain of events, the poverty, and etc. But if you look at the qualities, it was a fantastic pitch that was done by Rainforest Alliance a few years ago about why you should buy biodiversity-friendly coffee, and it was it showed a person, a guy who really was very committed to poverty, very committed to environment, and he goes from, and it was the perfect father, the perfect family member living in Washington and recycling and bicycling to work and recycling things and doing a lot of things. And a certain day he leaves Washington because he wants to do a lot of good things, and he goes to Central America, and he really convinced he has to save the forest and save the people, the farmers, and he enters into a series of catastrophic events where he goes to the forest and nobody really cares about him, and actually he ends up being beaten up by all the people that thinks he is not doing any good for them. And then he, instead of helping to conserve the forest, he ended up destroying the forest, because in a moment of distraction, he finally smoked his final cigar that he hadn't smoked for years, and he ended up burning the forest. And so all these chains of events, and then finally he goes back home, and some other tragic events happened, and so they're saying, instead than trying to do yourself the things of the good, just follow the frog, which is the symbol of Rainforest Alliance. So I was saying that we need, when we make a pitch, to think about these end results, and not really pitching on the good, on the poverty that maybe not everybody cares about, but really maybe on the quality.
Great.
That's what we care about.
Thank you very much. In order to give the other panelists, the other pitchers, enough time for their pitches, we're going to have to take the next pitch. So the dragons have spewed their fire. Thank you very much. Thank you, and you. I'd like to present Claudio. Claudio will be pitching from the Climate Change Group. So welcome, Claudio.
Dear Dragons, respectable audience, my name is Claudio Castro, and I represent the Forest, Agricultural, Mountains, and Land Use team, and we want to address and take our message to the Ministers of Agriculture and Environment. RED Plus has an amazing potential, but when we see the outcomes and the results, it doesn't reflect what is happening in our forests, because it's not addressing the drivers of deforestation. The reason why this is happening is because there is a lack of coordination between the environmental and the agricultural sectors. There are multiple challenges for RED Plus addressing the drivers of deforestation, including the lack of finance and persisting land tenure issue. You have the capacity and the potential to be the link between environmental and agricultural sectors. With the creation of intersectoral dialogue and working spaces, youth is unique in power to mediate this discussion. Moving forward, we propose young people to take the lead and of coordinating these spaces at multiple levels. Thanks. And for the record, I don't feel comfortable here. Not at all. I feel thirsty and excited, and I want to run through this door. Thank you.
That last part that you said after your presentation, after we clapped, that was the first thing you had to say. That would be great. You would feel more comfortable, and everybody would get in the spirit that you are here. You see? And it's still on the formal presentation issues. The way you hold your mic, not every time you're going to pitch you have a mic, but be attention of the way, be conscious of your environment, be conscious of the space that you have to use. If you're in a table, be conscious of your hand gestures, of your body language, eye contact. And I was going to say this to the previous speaker too, the eye contact. Don't be afraid to make eye contact. Very important. And try not to read. I know you're nervous, but try not to read. You have to, I myself do points, clear points that will bring to my mind what I want to say. And this is what I did here. I wrote down reading, and I'm telling you, just write down one word that's going to bring you back to your argument. That's it, thanks.
No, thank you.
Okay, so picking up, I guess, on the form, I would agree with what has just been said. I didn't get that passion through. I had a hard time understanding what you were pitching until the end of your pitch. And the issue that you address from the last few months I've been working in government, I think it's important. But we already have multi-sectoral working groups, and there's N amounts of different types of working groups to get sectors to work together. So I didn't understand how what you were pitching about youth getting involved to create this link between the environmental sector and the agricultural sector. What's the difference? Why is it going to be better? How is it going to make it work in comparison to existing working groups that don't work? So I would have liked to hear a bit more about the how on what you're proposing.
Sure, thank you.
So just to follow up on that, I think that's the key. Is you've definitely you captured the problem, and I think it's something everyone in this room knows that this is a problem and this is a priority. And I think if you talk to any Minister of Agriculture or Minister of Environment, they'd also recognize that they need to do this more. You just got to get what is your solution to this. And again, it's about the power of the idea. You know, you need to do something that is not another transaction cost, but something that is going to actually really solve this. And you know, I think youth have a lot to offer on that. But you got to use the power of youth, which is the idea, the capacity to think things differently, to do things differently. And so that's what you've got to transmit. Use all of that creativity you have and not be scared of it. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Yep. So I just want to add on to that, which is you at the end, right? You really believe, right, that youth have to be at the table and that youth views will have an impact, should have an impact. You have got to be way more disruptive. Why you cannot set a goal for yourself to take two of the most entrenched yet weak bureaucracies in any government, the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, and try to have them work better together, right? You have got to be more disruptive than that. You've got to either from the bottom up create such a damn movement that these ministries either, you know, look very different, get out of the way, or work totally differently, or you go from the top and concentrate their attention by grabbing hold of their budgets, by putting pressure above. You cannot afford to not think that big, because you've got the passion, you are youth, it is about you, and you know, we'll all be behind you if you just really sing for it, okay? Go for it.
Thank you, I will.
Thank you.
This is amazing. Thank you for your comments.
Run. Good, thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks to the panelists for some great feedback so far. We're here with our third pitcher, Mona, and Mona is from the group that looked at the post-2015 agenda and sustainable development. So here's Mona.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Buenos dias. So our team was in discussions on how youth perspectives on landscapes and the post-2015 development goals can most strongly contribute to the wider GLF platform as well as outcomes and to current debates and decisions on the sustainable development goals. And what we particularly focused on was finding ways to encourage and empower youth to stay and invest in rural areas. And why? Because we recognize that we recognize the important youth contribution to achieving global food security and to sustaining landscapes over the long term. And number two, because, however, we also know that rural youth are facing increasing challenges to actually secure their livelihoods as well as their careers in a reasonable and long-term way. And therefore, we are witnessing an increasing movement of rural youth to other areas in search for better opportunities. And therefore, our group prioritized many key issues and conditions that we need to think about and secure for young people to be able to support them to live and invest in rural areas. And the way I'd like to present those key priorities is by just thinking what young people in rural areas are thinking and trying to make that decision of whether to leave or to stay. For instance, they ask, how can I get proper education and healthcare services if I stay here? Number two, how can I invest in a land that I don't even own? Number three, do people even realize the significance of what we're doing? What is the value? Do people know where their food is coming from and how we contribute to that? So two key things that we would like from all of you. One is to convey and incorporate these messages and these questions of young people, rural youth, in your discussions with your constituencies and networks, but also why not start at this very conference here, and just whether it's at your plenary discussions or in your discussions in the workshops, why not convey these messages at this very conference? Number two, at a more practical level, how can we, if you could please help us initiate and engage with a global advocacy campaign that raises the awareness on the importance and the value of rural youth in contributing to global food security and sustainable development in whichever way you find within your means, whether it's through mobilizing resources or initiating research, or whether it's spreading to your networks and institutions. Thank you.
Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. So I want the world to become climate smart. How are you going to help me do that? How is youth from the rural areas going to help me there?
Okay. He's not expecting a question. Okay. Thank you very much for that, putting me on the spot right
First
there.
lesson of pitching. Always expect a question.
Could you just repeat that so it can give me time to think?
So I suppose you put yourself in our position right now. So you're asking us to advocate for these things. But what would, that if we're going to advocate, it has to have content, right? And so we need to have then the conviction that that advocacy that we give for youth is going to pay off, because youth are the future.
Okay.
I think that's an important one. I mean, the problems that we old fogies are going to leave behind, the problems that are going to inherit the youth now. But also, I think you have a lot to offer in the solution, and so I think you need to convey that much stronger. What do you bring to the table that is actually going to make me and us in our jobs actually have more success?
Sure.
I think there's a core that is really, really key in what you're saying, and that is that we can't isolate one goal from the other. We often talk about climate smart agriculture, which sometimes takes a very biophysical form and a very climate greenhouse gas emissions form, but it doesn't really look at, okay, so who's going to be the farmer and how are they going to make money and why do they want to be a farmer in the first place? So there's a core in here that I think is good, that as we move towards investing in that achieving those sustainable development goals, we really need to take it as a whole, and we can't invest in rural areas and think that we if they have the right seeds and the right market conditions, this will be all fine, because it's a much more complex setup. But as I agree with Andy, I'm not sure exactly what you're proposing here, and I'm also not sure about the proposition that one would be able to change the minds of youth to move to the cities anyway. There must be a more dynamic solution here. It's not just stopping flow from one point to another. I think it's more about creating opportunities to move around in your careers and in your landscapes.
I don't think so. Oh yeah, no, it is. Yeah, so I also didn't understand quite what you're pitching, but at the end, I think you were getting to it with this advocacy campaign. Something that stood out to me, which I didn't enjoy hearing, was your plead. Please help us with this advocacy campaign. You need to convince me that I need to help you. You need to make me as passionate as you are about this advocacy campaign that you want to launch. And maybe to clear this doubt, what would have been more useful would have been to pitch that advocacy campaign that you're pitching, but we don't know the content of the advocacy campaign. I think the three issues that you pointed out are very clear, and for example, you mentioned how people don't value where their food comes from. There was a really interesting study recently on how primary school children in the States don't recognize meat in supermarkets as coming from cattle in farms. So maybe describing a bit clearer the content of this advocacy campaign, what type of points you would be touching upon would have helped us understand better. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hello? Yes, I'm on? Okay, just very briefly, I wanted to say that I think the topic is extremely important, but I would have started by saying that basically the young people are the engine of development. And if the young people are not in the rural area working on landscape development, the landscape are abandoned. And if the landscape are abandoned, we might not have food, we might not have security, we might have more issues of disaster management, because if I see it in my own country, in Italy, you know, the abandoned countryside is leading to a lot of issues of you know, whenever you have rains, etc., etc. So we need to work with you. You are the engine for the rural area.
Was similar to hers. You took for granted that rural youth wants to stay here. Rural youth, at least in my country, the exodus to the cities, to the movement to the cities, starts with the youth. It's the first to go to the cities. The youth, they don't see the prospects of their future life in the jobs of their fathers. They go to the cities to look for other work, to look for education, to look for health. And I think that's the point it's worth getting into before you move on to the proposition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mona. Thank you again to the Dragons. We have our final pitcher. Beatrice will be pitching from the Integrated Landscapes Approach Group.
Hi, everyone. Irene Homfmeier. We, the group of landscapes implementation, would like to direct our message to you, exactly. First of all, let me tell you that we are very honored that you are a part of this panel, because you are representing us as a member of the young professional community, and you are exactly the person that we want to help us send our message. So let me first tell you how our discussion went. We were negotiating a landscape approach where we were trying to find a common ground on how to implement a fracking project. We had many different stakeholders, a mining corporation, an indigenous community, federal government, among others. We found that the biggest challenges to landscape implementation is to actually make even the distribution of power and the distribution of capacities. So for this, we came up with two very specific recommendations on how to implement a successful landscape. The first one is to develop local platforms in which direct funding is aimed at these local platforms of stakeholders, in which the priority is to develop capacities. The second recommendation is to make data from public make data of landscape approaches available to every member of the community. And this way we could make availability of information transparent and make everyone, give everyone the same power. We ask you to bring these recommendations as a representative of young professionals to the Ministry of the Environment of Peru to recommend how a landscape approach should be implemented in Peru. So with this in mind, let me just reiterate my message. Landscape approaches, to be effective, they need to start with distribution of power and capacities. This is how they'll be effective. So with this, let me say we're very glad that you're here, and we hope you can help us send our message.
Should I start? Okay, everybody's looking at me. Thank you for hitting the nail on this one, because the landscape approach, to me, is not about what exactly to do in the terrain with the trees or with the farms or whatever. The landscape approach is about negotiating priorities. And in that sense, yes, you're absolutely right that creating the possibilities to have those negotiations in an equitable way and without risks for safety or other issues related to poor governance. This is what needs to happen. I would make one comment, though, and that is that I don't think this is about creating new platforms. I think the landscapes already exist. The landscapes are areas where some form of governance already exists. We need to improve those platforms and invest in, whether it is municipalities, whether it is communities, whether it is even farming groups or whatever it is. We need to invest in those platforms. I would also make the comment that it's not about sending money in an envelope. I think this should be much more results-oriented. This is about investing in the future, and we should think about these ventures as investment ventures rather than grant ventures. Thank you.
So something that I was doing some of the training, actually. I'm a little bit of a cheat here. I was training before I got on my private jet. I was training some of these, and one of the first things I said is that everyone, actually, all the time, you're pitching at people and people are pitching at you. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we've all actually just done pitches to the pitches. But on the delivery of that one, Beatrice, my attention deficit disorder was kicking in the middle. It's dense material, right? You're talking about capacities, you're talking about negotiation processes, landscapes, and all sorts of, there's a lot of themes in there, and my kind of deficit disorder was beginning to in the middle I just kind of lost a little bit there, and then I kicked in at the end again. So I think you've got to find innovative ways of putting these across. So use of that when you get into that density, it's useful to use your hands, use different means or stories to keep the pitch going, keep the energy level high. That would be my feedback on that.
I guess I should probably give some feedback too. I can't stop thinking about, I have a friend that works at Rio Tinto, and they're quite good at actually setting up these local platforms and developing capacities within different stakeholder groups where they develop their projects. But she was telling me an interesting story about how they had a serious problem in one of their communities because the group that they had been supporting and the community leader that had kind of stood up to receive and manage the funding was only distributing it within its family members. So I think local platforms are important, and you need to build capacity and build resources. Maybe not direct funding, but looking about type of investments, how both Peter and John mentioned. But how can we go about overcoming these corruption issues that happen at all levels? And I think that's where the real challenge is. How do we get it down to the ground level without, especially where there's these power struggles, and it's a reality, especially in our country, that this happens. So that's kind of my challenge back to you. I think more than proposing local platforms with direct investment, how do we implement these local platforms with direct investment and transparency?
If I can just add one more point. I think that after hearing all of you, you all sounded a little bit like mini bankers. And I think you did not use your youth, your energy, your spirit. And that's the comparative advantage you have. So you should not imitate what you are not. You're not a government official or a very senior person, but just use really what is your asset. That is your being young and being energetic and more. You can be more naive or more simple, whatever. But use that element.
I spent a considerable number of years in my career actually mediating or building spaces for these kinds of disputes to get discussed and hopefully resolved across communities, across landscapes, often working with big mining, big infrastructure, big oil, gas. And I have to say that what I was intrigued by is, and maybe it's the same point as Paola, I don't know, your faith in government. I mean, you're asking government, I mean, government's an essential part of the component. They have to be at the table, but they are normally the weakest link. And I think you've got the grain of something here, right? I mean, that these disputes and the power relationships and the co-management of scarce resources is going to be an enormous, is problematic, will always be problematic, is going to require us to have long-standing spaces where we can go to sort these things out. And people of every background need to have the capacity to enter into that space and be able to sort it out. But as youth, I want to see you running for office. I want to see you taking the reins of power. I want to see you, running municipalities and mayoralties. Because a lot of this will come to local government, and local government's the weakest of the weakest link in many, many, many situations. So I'm now going to plead to the picture that you go back, get the problem really, really clear, because you had it there, but there were little different facets of it. And ask yourself, what is the most radical solution to that particular problem? Because I think that we haven't got time to nibble around the edges. And, I think that it's time to take some of the reins of power and to, both formally and informally, and force these conversations, because they're not going to happen otherwise. And I don't think that you've got time to wait.
Great. Thank you so much, Beatriz. Can we give a quick round of applause to all of our panelists and all of our pitchers? And a major thanks to all of our pitchers and the facilitators for coming up with these recommendations today. They only had 2 hours to produce these recommendations, so you can imagine we can't save the world in 2 hours, but we can try to start. We have a couple of minutes for questions, so I think we can take 2 from the audience. Yeah? Maybe you could start walking up here with your hands raised. Great.
So we were in master classes on Friday. One of them was pitching, and Andy was able to share with us what the best pitch was that he's ever heard. So I was wondering if you guys could tell us what the best pitches you've heard and what made it special, or what made you remember that pitch.
I think the best pitch I ever heard is the one that convinced me to start my own company. So it was actually a tech talk by Captain Charles Moore on plastic pollution. And I was in my final year of college, and there was an entrepreneurship competition. A friend in BCom was like, hey, Irene, we should do a pitch, do a project. And I'm like, oh, there's so many environmental issues. I have no idea which one we should base it on. And I was just kind of scrolling through the web. I had recently reread an article on plastic pollution, but I basically knew nothing about it back then. And I stumbled upon this TED Talk and became so convinced that it was like the issue that we need to start working on, that for the last 5 years, that's pretty much what I've dedicated my life to. So yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, I'll take an example from when I worked at FAO earlier, and this must have been 4 years ago, perhaps, and in the team I was running at the time that coordinated the climate change work at FAO. One of the people in the team came up with the idea that, oh, we need to figure out how to address the climate change and agriculture, and we need to find a way to explain it. And they came up with the word climate smart agriculture. I thought that was a good pitch. I think it's now getting some traction.
Yeah, it worked.
I guess just to build on my answer, one thing, if you've ever seen anything that Charles Moores do, he's so visual. He always has samples from the gyres and concrete examples of plastic pollution. So I think that really helps to get the message across. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the best pitch I ever heard was from a guy called Andy Cooper, who is now I think, CEO and president of something called Leapfrog Investments. And when he first pitched, remarkably, there were no equity investments in microinsurance anywhere in the world. Microinsurance was beginning to grow, but it was all being funded out of debt, and it was going very slowly. And he walked in, and he's a little guy, and he was young, and stood in front of all of these captains of finance, and sort of looked like an unlikely hero. But he had his data down, he had his evidence at his fingertips, he had absolute passion, he looked deadly serious, and you got the impression that when he got knocked down, he was just going to get back up again. And he had his numbers and all the rest of it. But it was the knock down, get back up again that I think sold everybody. And he has taken the business, grown the business. It's now a global business. They sold, they actually got that whole Africa microinsurance business for equity got bought for $450 billion last year, and he's opened the opportunity for microinsurance to millions of people around the world, and it is still going. So from a very, very, very small acorn, something very big and transformative can happen. But it was because this unlikely looking guy gave you the impression that nothing was going to stop him, and if one door closed, he would find another one that would open.
In general, I don't have a concrete example. My general idea of a perfect pitch is the one that gets you thinking. I know this Dragon's Den style is the immediate moment reaction, constantly the immediate moment reaction, but for me, it's actually the day, later in the day, the last thing you think about when you go to bed, the next day when you slept on it, and the follow-up of the idea that has been pitched to you. So that makes a good pitch. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, is it? And thank you to the Dragons for the wonderful feedback and contributions. Kudos to the pitchers. I'm very honored, feeling very privileged to be in this room. I'm Aisha from Jamaica, to be among accomplished young people and older, wiser folks like yourselves. But we don't represent the majority. There are a million more young people where we're from who do not have access to this space, to your minds and the ideas that you put forward, and would never in their lives dream of being in this room. What is the one message that you would give us to take back to wherever we're going when we leave here, to those young people who feel a sense of hopelessness and fear just in navigating this big, scary thing called the world and life?
So I can go. I mean, you need to channel any sense of hopelessness. That feeling of hopelessness is the very solution that you have. It is the fact that you feel hopelessness is because there's a problem. And the fact that you're feeling that also gives you the power to actually say why it's a problem and how you need to do it differently. And so it's just be bold and excited. You can do it, and don't feel like the kind of the system is against you. I think you just need to express yourselves and go for it. For me, the best pitch I ever got was from a 17-year-old, and it was fantastic. And he got a job within 2 hours. That was the way it worked, and it was because he had no fear, and he just said what he felt, and that's very powerful.
Can I say something? Sorry.
Okay. So what would I say to some of the younger people that cannot be here? I think that considering the theme of a Global Landscape Forum, I think that one of the things that I'm always worried is about rural areas being abandoned, as I told you before. And I think it's very important that young people who live in rural area are very proud of their origins. So what I would tell them is be proud of where you come from. Be proud of being from the countryside. Bring up, there is an immense culture behind the agricultural and the rural landscape. It can become even a destination for tourism wherever you are from. And you can teach to the urban people so many things. So I think that's making the young people proud of what they are from and of the rural landscape is going to go very far.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on one thing Andy said, and that is that I think we need to turn around this problem orientation that we're so stuck in. Look at forests. It's always a problem. Deforestation, forest degradation, loss of biodiversity, illegal logging, fires, always a problem. Nobody talks about the opportunities. And I think that's the way out of maybe this hopelessness that you mentioned, that we really need to turn around and figure out what are the opportunities we have, because it's not a lost game, far from it.
Well, I think you talked about two different problems, but interrelated. One is, the feeling of isolation when you feel hopelessness, or you feel that you don't quite see your way through the challenge, and you think that perhaps you're the only one that feels that way. If you're in this room today, you are by definition a leader. And there is a responsibility that goes with that. And when you leave this room and you go home, you have to hold out your hand to that person who might not have the courage to say, I'm worried about this, or I don't know how to engage, or I don't know how to find out information, or I don't know how to think through. You should find a way to hold your hand out so it's easier for them to ask for help. Because you've each got two hands, right? So if everybody in this room did that just to two people, then you start to build connection. So first of all, you are leaders if you are in this room. You have a responsibility to use that leadership because you do have information and you do have possession of the facts. And it is isolating to believe that you feel something that other people don't feel. And in this world today, isolation, despite our connectivity, is a very real problem. The second issue is whether this is a hopeless situation or not. And I would just go back, recent history, ancient history, a very small number of people can make very, very rapid change. Very rapid change. And the discipline that, as leaders, you have to be able to develop is to ask for help. It's so empowering. When people are asked for help, we will help. We will help, even if we don't know what that help looks like. People want to be connected, people want to connect. So you can hold out your hands to other people, and you can also, as a leader, ask for the help that you need in order to mobilize, in order to grow, in order to advocate, in order to start a new business, in order to protect, treat, whatever it is. Ask for help, and people will innately respond to that.
Fantastic. I would love to give every panelist 20 minutes to answer this question, but unfortunately, we have a very strict time schedule to adhere to, so I'd like to give a final round of applause to the panelists. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd now like to invite our closing speaker up, Danai Espinoza, whose name I'm sure I've just butchered, from the UNFCCC Youth NGO